folks, this is Meredith from the Papery Craftery. Today I'm going to be showing you how I make my lace hearts. I think they work really well in pastel colors. You can see I've made one here in a pale gray and ivory. I'm going to be showing today how to make one in a pale pink color. I have Craft Harbor pale pink paper to use. I do also have a template for the heart shapes that I'm going to be using. I will be linking to that down below in the description box. Other supplies you're going to need are some scissors to cut out your template. You're definitely going to need a ruler, a pencil. I'm going to be using a needle tool here, but a slotted tool will be fine. You're going to want to grab your favorite glue in a needle nose container. I'm using Elmer's, and also a work board covered in wax paper and some straight pins. After you print off your heart template, you're going to choose which size you're going to be working with. I'm going to be demonstrating the smaller size today, but the same process can be used for the larger heart as well. What you're going to be doing is using this template to build your heart on top of. That's where your work board comes in. I've had a lot of questions about this recently, so I just want to make sure I make this really clear. You're going to be using your printed out heart right on top of the cork, and then you're going to put the wax paper on top of that. Before you do that though, you do have to make some measurements on your heart. That's where the ruler and pencil are going to come in. Starting at the base of the heart, or the point on the bottom, you're going to want to measure a 1/2 inch sections and make a little mark every 1/2 inch. I always start with one down at the bottom, just like that, and then I go up at 1/2 inch, make a little mark, and then I'm going to keep going all the way around the heart until I get to the center where it dips down at the top. You can see here I have 1/2 inch marks all the way around my heart. After I did one side, I went back, started at the bottom, and did the other side as well. So they should be about even on both sides. I think I ended up with 12 1/2 inch marks on either side of the heart. So 12 on one side and then 12 on the other side. Once you have your heart marked, you're going to pin the wax paper on top of it on all 4 corners to keep everything in place. And if you're unfamiliar with this technique, we're going to be building on top of the wax paper. Now we are going to start building your heart, the outline of the heart. And what we're going to be doing is using the on-edge technique. And I have an entire video about the on-edge technique. I'm going to link this right now on the top of the screen. You'll see a link for that video if you haven't watched it. It explains exactly what I'm doing here and why I'm folding this strip in half. I'm going to fold it in half. I'm going to add some glue all the way from the middle fold to the end, and then I'm going to press them together so that it makes a double thick strip. I also want to mention real quick, these strips, the Craft Harbor paper, are 24 inches long. So this half strip here is going to be about 12 inches. And again, if you're not familiar with the on-edge technique or you have any questions about exactly what I'm doing right here, I have an entire video about it. I would go ahead and start there. You're going to need about 6 or 7 strips like this to make this heart. So I have those pre-made, and I'm going to set them aside, and I'm going to need one to start the outline of the heart now. I'm going to grab my wax paper covered template, and I'm going to use one of those thick strips to start the outline. Like I said, I'm going to start at one of the indents of the peak, the top of the heart, and I'm going to work my way around. A lot of this information is on that same On Edge video, but I'm gonna explain it here anyway. So I like to kind of soften up those strips. It makes them a little bit more flexible, especially around curved edges. And starting at a point, like I did there, I apply a few drops of glue on the line that I'm going to be outlining with paper. And I use some pins to kind of anchor the strip on either side at my starting point. And then I want to let that set for a minute or two so it doesn't move right away. And then using my bottle, I'm going to add a few more drops of glue. I do a few inches at a time, right on the outline of the heart, because that's where I want this strip to lay. And then I'm going to show you here how I just press my paper into the shape that I want it to be. Because I folded this paper in half and it's nice and thick, it's got a good weight to it. It's gonna stay in this shape pretty easily. I'm using the pins just to guide the paper into the shape I want. I'm not pinning through the quilling paper. They're just on either side of the strip so it lines up exactly where I want it. When I get to the peak of the heart at the bottom, I put a pin there. There you can see. I'm wiping away any extra glue just to make it a little bit neater. And then at that peak of the heart, because there's a pin right there, I can kind of bend it, the paper around it to get a nice crease. And then I'm going to continue up the other side of the heart. A few more dots of glue on that side. And just like the first time, using some pins to guide my paper in place. I form the other side of the heart. As luck would have it, this quilling strip happened to fit perfectly, and so the end met right where I started, which was really nice. But if it's a little bit longer, you would just cut off any excess. If it's a little bit shorter, you can piece more than one piece together. That's okay too. Different brands of quilling paper are different length, and it's totally okay. So that's what the outline looks like. I'm going to leave the pins in for a few minutes, and then I'm going to be able to pull them out. Because again, we had a tiny bit of glue on the underneath side. That dries pretty quickly, and it's going to help keep your shape in place. Next, we're going to use those little 1/2-inch marks that you drew on your template. This is where these are going to start coming in handy. We're going to get another piece of that double thick quilling paper that we've already made. Remember, you made more than one. Soften that up by running it through my fingers a few times, tearing off an edge because we like to work with torn edges in quilling. And I'm going to start again at the peak of the heart, the point at the bottom. Applying a little bit of glue. I should have just done the one dot, so ignore the fact that I did a few dots in a row here. I kind of jumped ahead rather than waiting what I would normally do here. So starting at the point, I added a tiny bit of glue, and I'm going to sit my strip on the edge, add a couple of pins so it stays upright. And normally I would let this dry for a few seconds so it really gets a chance to adhere, but for the sake of time for the video, I'm just sort of pressing on. What I'm going to be doing next is forming sort of these decorative bumps on the outside of the heart. And to keep the shapes kind of even and to keep the paper in the shape I want it to, I'm using pins to form those bumps. So you can see there I put a pin and then I kind of wrap the paper around the pin and glue it to where it's meeting the heart. Every place where it meets the heart is one of those 1/2 inch little notches that I did before. So again, I apply a little bit of glue to where a 1/2 inch mark is, put a pin where I want the paper to wrap around, and then use another pin to get the paper to hit the glue. I don't know how much sense that makes in words, but it might make more sense just to watch the video. I'm just using 2 different kinds of pins here. One to wrap the paper around so it makes the bump, and another one to make sure that the strip stays on the outline of the heart at every 1/2 inch. And I'm going to end up doing that all the way until I get to the last 1/2 inch mark. I'm not going to do it all the way to the center of the heart because it's not going to end up being even. This is what I'm going to do in the middle, is make kind of a bigger bump that goes all the way to the other 1/2 of the heart. And to do that I use 2 pins because it's a little bit of a bigger space. But I just want to show, this is another way that you can use pins in quilling. It's not just to keep things next to each other, but you can form your paper around them sometimes to get more of a shape that you're looking for. And I decided to snip off the rest of my paper strip right at this point because it was a little bit too short to really do anything on the other 1/2 of the heart. So that's why I decided just to get rid of that excess right there and stop with that middle section of the top of the heart. But I'm going to take a new strip and then I'm going to continue on the other side in the same exact way that I did those bumps on there. So again, starting at the middle on the bottom, apply some glue and get your strip set up right at the peak of the heart with a couple of pins to keep it in place. And then once that sets, you're going to make those bumps with the 2 different types of pins along every 1/2 inch on the other side. And this is where I am going to be finishing up the last of the bumps. So a pin in the middle and then a pin to keep it in place on the glue. And then I have one more to do, and I will snip off any excess paper where it hits the first strip that I've already completed. At this point, I have all of the first layer of decorative bumps on the outside of my heart. This is what it should look like if you are doing the same thing at this point. A bump every 1/2 inch and then one larger one in the middle. After that glue has set for a little bit, you can go ahead and take your pins out. I had some bumps that didn't end up staying along the outside, so I did have to re-glue them and repin, but this is what it should look like more or less once your pins are out. What we're going to do now is the same thing, but we're going to be doing another layer. These are going to be larger bumps on the outside. So you'll see what I mean here. We're going to start again right at the peak on the bottom, applying a little bit of glue and putting another double thick strip on the edge there. And this time, instead of making a bump every ½ inch, we're actually going to be doing a full inch. And whoop, again, I didn't let my glue set long enough here. That was my fault. Normally, you will let yours sit for a minute or two so you don't have to re-glue. And just like before, I'm going to be molding my bumps around a pin. And since we marked off ½ inches before, I know that every 2 ½ inch bumps is going to equal 1 inch. So that's what I'm doing here. Same exact process. Molding around a pin and then using a pin and some glue to finish the bump where I want it to be. I want it a little bit shallow, so I'm going to move that pin out a little bit. This is sort of an eyeball kind of situation. So that's why we didn't do any extra measuring to see how deep our bumps are going to be. You just kind of want to make them even. And just keep continuing around this side of your heart until you get to the center of the top portion. And at that point, you're going to cut off any excess paper and then do the same process on the other side of the heart. I want you to notice real quick before I move on to the next part that at the top of my heart, I only have 1 layer of bumps right at the top, and that's because you can only, to make it even, have 6 on either side, and the middle of the top only has 1 layer. That's totally fine. We're going to fill something in there later that's going to make it blend in. But I just wanted to mention that real quick. The next thing we're going to be doing is adding some pieces between those 2 bumps to kind of fill it in and just give it a little bit more detail. What I'm going to do is tear off small strips of a double thick piece, kind of measure them first by eye, and then if I need to adjust them with some scissors. And I'm going to be filling these in. I needed a little bit more trim there. Filling these in, I'm going to add a straight piece and then 2 curved pieces. Again, just a little bit more detail. If you don't want to do this step, you don't have to, but think that lace has a lot going on to it. It's not just one small thing. So there's the straight piece. I use my tweezers to dip either end in some glue. This one isn't being as straight as I'd like it to, but that's okay. And now I'm going to curve the strip slightly over my finger, tear off a piece, measure it again, still a little bit long. At this point, I just have to re-glue that center piece because it does not want to stay. So, quick glue break. Now we're back to try to add a slight curved piece to the sides. Again, I kind of measure it by eye, tear off what I think it's going to be, use my tweezers, a little bit long again. Better to be long than keep making pieces too short. And let's see if that one fits. That looks good. Couple dips of glue. And that should stay just fine. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side of that center line. Add another curved strip, just like so. A little bit of measure. Let's see if that one fits. No. No problem. Another quick snip of the scissors. And then once we get that double checked, we're going to add a little bit of glue to those pieces again and get that lined up where we want it. And keep doing that all the way around the rest of your heart in the larger section. We're going to leave the small ones be. For this project, I'm just going to show you how to fill in the larger ones. We're going to do that all the way around. So the 6 on this side and then the 6 on the other side. We're going to leave that center one be for a little bit, and we'll come back to that after, and I'll show you how I fill that in. At this point, I have filled in all those spaces, those 6 on either side, and now I'm going to show how I fill in that last center area. I'm just going to use 2 curved pieces of that double thick quilling paper to just fill in that space and give sort of a reminiscent design to the rest of it. It's not exactly the same, but it's close enough that it's going to look like it matches. So I'm going to put one curved to one side, and then I'm going to tear another piece off that's going to be curved in the other direction. We just have one more decorative element that we're going to put on our hearts. We're going to put little tight coils around the edge of the entire piece. For the size for these, we're actually doing 2 different sets. We're doing a larger coil that's going to be right at the top of every one of those 12 large bumps that we put on the outside. They're going to be made from 2-inch papers. And then we're also going to need a whole mess of 1-inch strips to make tight coils that are going to fill in all the other space around the heart. It's going to take a lot, like 100 plus probably, but I did it, watch a couple shows, just kind of zone out, make a whole bunch. You'll be done before you know it. So just as a review, what I'm doing here is I'm rolling the entire strip from start to finish. While it's still on my tool, I'm adding a little bit of glue to the end and making sure that's sealed tight. So it just looks like a small little circle of quilling paper. So again, we need 12 of the larger ones at 2 inches and then a lot of the small ones. When you're ready to apply these pegs to the outside of your heart, start with the larger ones. Add a tiny bit of glue right to the peak of the larger bumps, and then either using your needle tool or your fingers or a pair of tweezers, whatever you like, even a pin, just like I'm doing there. I stick it on the end of a pin. That keeps it in place and keeps my fingers from getting gluey when I'm doing small things. you're just going to apply them all the way around your heart, only on the larger bumps that are on the outside. And then once your larger pegs are on, you can go ahead and fill in all the rest of the space on the outside of your heart with the small pegs. And I just wanted to show one more way that you can make those pegs go a little bit faster. If you make a little a dab of glue on maybe your wax paper or an extra piece of cardboard or something, and then dip the end of your 1-inch strips to make those small pegs right in there, then you can just roll up your peg on your tool and not have to reach for your glue every time. I do that when I'm making a whole bunch of these. I just make a little dab of glue on something, do a little dip, and then roll them right up. It takes a lot less time than having to reach every couple seconds for your glue. Anyway, back to the heart. I just made a line of glue all the way on the outside of that one bump from the bottom, and I'm just going to start lining up these pegs. You can use your fingers again, you can use tweezers, you can use your needle tool again to kind of deposit them right there, but you're looking for the entire outside. Anywhere there's not one of the larger pegs, fill them in with the small ones. You'll need about between 5 or 6 on each side of each bump. So about 5 of those, 6 of those, and then the larger one, the larger peg, and then continue around again to the other side. Take all your pins out when everything is dry, and this should be about what you're looking at. Bear in mind, as always, this is just a starting point. This is just an idea. Lace can take on any different kind of design. Do some research. I wish I had done some. Maybe I could have explained this in a different way that made more sense, but it's just light and it's airy and it's open, and you can fill in this however you'd like. This, again, is just a starting off point. But that is what you should be looking at more or less when you are through. And you can mount this however you like, on a card or on a piece of mat board. When you're ready to take it off your wax paper, you can slide your needle tool right underneath. Just give it a little bit of a shimmy shake, and that will loosen any of the glue that is keeping it there. Because you used all that double thick paper, this is going to be really nice and strong. So don't be too afraid. You can see I wasn't super gentle there. I was really kind of giving it some elbow grease. And if there's any little glue bits on the back, you can snip those off if you like. For more ideas about how you can use one of these hearts, again, you can just mount it on a simple piece of mat board and frame it. If you want to go really crazy, you can make more than one. You can split them maybe and just do some sort of intertwined heart type situation. Something along those lines, but using half of two different colored hearts. I don't know. World's your oyster. Be creative. Let me know what you do. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to leave any comments that you might have down below. As always, I try to get back to any questions as soon as I can. I always like to leave any products that I use down in the description box because I've been getting a lot of questions lately about different supplies and different tools. So look for that down below. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can be notified the next time that I make another video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.